They called it strategic restructuring, but to me, it felt like betrayal dressed in corporate language. After years of building relationships, managing crises, and becoming the person clients called by name, not by title, I was handed a severance letter like I was nothing more than a line item in a spreadsheet. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. But what they didn't realize is that while they could strip me of my job, they couldn't take away the trust I'd earned. So when the phones kept ringing, they didn't ask for the company, they asked for me. The first whispers of restructuring floated through the halls like a bad draft, subtle but chilling. The execs had started holding closed-door meetings more frequently, and the usually chatty HR reps had suddenly gone tight-lipped. I'd been through enough cycles to recognize the signs. A storm was coming. Still, I stayed focused on my work. After all, I wasn't just doing a job, I was the bridge between the company and our clients. I'd handled multi-million-dollar accounts, personally resolved crises that could have buried us, and led campaigns that pulled us from the red more than once. My name carried weight in those boardrooms, even if I didn't have a title with chief in it. Then came the email. Cold. Unapologetic. Your position has been eliminated due to company restructuring. Your access will be revoked at 5 p.m. Just like that. 19 years reduced to 4 sentences. I sat frozen at my desk, reading and rereading the words as if they'd change the next time around. There was no call, no face-to-face meeting. Just a digital bullet, fired straight through the heart of my career. I packed my things slowly, methodically. A few framed photos, some thank you cards from clients, a coffee mug that read "Calm under pressure," a joke gift from my team after I managed to save a crumbling contract during a power outage in the middle of a product launch. My phone buzzed. It was Nora, one of my longtime clients, texting to confirm our 3 p.m. call. I stared at the screen, unsure of what to say. Then I simply typed, "We'll talk at 3. As planned. I walked out with my box in hand, nodding politely to the receptionist. No one made eye contact. No one said goodbye. The place I had devoted nearly 2 decades to treated me like a security risk now. But the moment I got home, my personal phone started ringing. "Is it true?" Nora's voice cracked on the other end. "Hang on over there," I explained, carefully choosing my words to avoid burning bridges, at least not yet. But the anger wasn't mine alone. Within hours, I received emails from 5 more clients. By the end of the week, 12 of my top accounts had either called or written to say they were reconsidering their partnerships. "They only want to talk to you," said Jason, a former colleague who was still at the company. "The new guy, some flashy VP from a tech startup, he doesn't know the first thing about our client base. He tried pitching to one of your accounts, and they shut him down." I felt torn. I was still licking my wounds, still waking up with a knot in my stomach, but a quiet sense of validation began to stir in me. I wasn't irrelevant. I wasn't replaceable. They'd cut me loose without realizing I was the glue. A week later, I was sitting at a coffee shop when I got an unexpected call from the company's COO. He wanted to chat. He said they were reassessing some aspects of the restructuring. "I've heard from a number of our key clients," he admitted. "There's concern. About continuity. About trust. They're asking for you specifically." I didn't respond right away. Let him squirm. "We're wondering if you'd consider coming back. As a consultant." That word, consultant, landed hard. No benefits. No security. A glorified temp. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. That night, I took out my old notebooks, reviewing pages of client notes, projects, and pain points. I knew these people better than most of their internal teams. I remembered their kids' names, their anniversaries, the exact moment they were ready to trust us. That kind of equity wasn't built overnight. And certainly not by someone who just walked in with a shiny resume. 2 days later, I got another call, this time from Nora. They're panicking. They brought in someone new to handle my account. He talked over me the entire meeting. I told them flat out, I'm pausing the contract until they fix this. I didn't ask her to do that. She did it on her own. And she wasn't the only one. Within a few more days, at least 4 other clients suspended or reduced their contracts. I could feel the pressure mounting inside that building where my name was no longer on the door. Jason sent me a text, the new VP is sweating. He can't control the narrative. Word is the board's asking questions. I smiled. I wasn't out for revenge. But I wasn't about to disappear quietly either. The tipping point came on a rainy Thursday morning. I was sipping coffee, watching the gray sky fold into itself, when my phone rang again. This time, it was Gerald. He was one of our biggest clients, and I hadn't expected to hear from him directly. He was usually hands-off, trusting his team to handle everything unless things really hit the fan. That morning, his voice was ice-cold. I just spent 30 minutes being talked at by your replacement, he said without a greeting. He told me what our company needs as if we haven't been in this business longer than he's been alive. No listening. No strategy. Just buzzwords. You're not there, Karen, and everything's falling apart. I tried to stay professional. I'm sorry to hear that, Gerald. I'm no longer with the company, so. That's not good enough, he cut in. I've already pulled our quarterly renewal paperwork. We're done unless you're involved. They can call it consulting, advisory, or whatever term lets them sleep at night. But if you're not working directly on our account, I'm walking. He hung up. No hesitation. Just a line in the sand. Within an hour, I received 3 more similar calls. Not threats, just facts. The message was crystal clear, they didn't trust the new team. They trusted me. Later that afternoon, I received another message from the company. This one wasn't from the COO or HR, it was from the new VP himself, the one who had replaced me. His tone was desperate, the polish stripped from his words. I underestimated your value, he admitted. We're bleeding clients. They're requesting you by name. I'd like to speak, maybe we can figure out a way to collaborate. Collaborate. Another safe word to save face. But I didn't reply right away. I wanted him to feel what I had felt, uncertainty, insecurity, and the slow sting of being irrelevant. Instead of responding, I called Nora and asked if she'd be open to a private consultation, just me and her team, no contracts, no companies involved. She was enthusiastic. If you go solo, I'll bring the account to you. Simple as that. That was the first spark. The idea had been growing inside me since the day I was let go, but now it ignited. Why go back at all? Why not build something of my own? I began putting together a plan. Quietly. Carefully. I reached out to a handful of trusted clients and floated the idea of an independent consulting firm. One that wasn't bound by corporate bloat or internal politics. One that was built on experience, transparency, and relationships, everything the company had forgotten. The response was overwhelming. By the end of the week, 7 clients had verbally committed. Some offered retainers just to reserve my time. I hadn't even printed a business card yet. Then, just as I was finalizing the name for my new venture, I received a formal email from the company's legal department. It was laced with polite threats, reminders about non-compete clauses, intellectual property, client confidentiality. They wanted to scare me back into silence. But they were too late. I had already spoken to a lawyer of my own. The non-compete clause had a fatal flaw. It expired after 90 days of severance, which they never paid me. They terminated my position immediately without notice, forfeiting the payout. That meant I was free. When I replied, I CC'd my attorney and attached a copy of my severance letter. My legal counsel advises that your claim has no standing, I wrote. Further communication can be directed through my lawyer. It was the first time in 19 years I had truly felt in control. The company scrambled. Jason texted me updates from inside. The board was livid. 5 major clients had left in less than 2 weeks. The COO had started investigating how my termination had been handled. The new VP? He was suddenly taking some personal time. Meanwhile, I launched quietly, just a website, a business email, and a few posts on LinkedIn. But those posts gained traction fast. Clients commented publicly, endorsing my skills, sharing stories about how I had helped their businesses. It became a ripple effect. Within days, I had 10 active accounts lined up and 3 prospective partnerships pending. I wasn't just surviving, I was growing. A week later, I was invited to a corporate panel on client retention, ironically hosted by the same company that had let me go. I declined. But then Nora called and said, "You need to show up. You need to speak. People need to hear what you did." And so, with some hesitation, I agreed. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for everyone who had ever been told they were replaceable. The day of the event, I walked into that room with my head held high. Former coworkers stared, some smiled, some looked away. The VP wasn't there. Rumor had it he was no longer with the organization. When I took the stage, I didn't gloat. I simply told my story, how relationships can't be restructured, how loyalty can't be downsized. I ended with one final sentence: when people trust you, not your title, that's when you've truly built something that matters. The applause was louder than I expected. And in the crowd, I saw Gerald, Nora, and 3 other clients nodding proudly. I had been terminated, but I was far from finished. In the weeks following the panel, the momentum only grew. What started as a survival instinct had transformed into something bigger, a calling, a purpose. The messages started pouring in from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were former colleagues who had quietly cheered me on from the sidelines, others were industry professionals who had watched the panel online and saw themselves in my story. A few even admitted they were still trapped in companies that undervalued them, terrified of taking the leap I had made. They asked how I did it. Not the legal part, not the branding, but the emotional leap. How did I choose myself after being told I wasn't needed? I didn't sugarcoat my answers. I told them there were nights I barely slept, mornings I second-guessed everything, and moments when the silence from people I once considered friends stung deeper than the termination itself. But I also told them this: no company can measure your worth if you already know it. Meanwhile, my new consultancy was thriving. What started with a handful of loyal clients quickly evolved into a boutique firm with a small but passionate team. I hired 2 former coworkers who had also been pushed out during the restructuring. They were hesitant at first, still licking their wounds, but after just one meeting, they lit up. "It feels good to work somewhere we're heard," one of them said quietly. And she was right. We weren't just doing projects anymore. We were building something intentional, something free from the empty noise of internal politics. The company that had let me go, however, was not doing so well. Jason, my longtime friend who was still inside, continued to send quiet updates. Another major client had walked out. Morale was at an all-time low. They had held an emergency all-hands meeting to announce a refocusing strategy, but everyone knew what that meant: layoffs were coming. Again. Ironically, they started reaching out to former employees, hoping to contract out some of the work that their current team couldn't handle. I received a message from their senior manager, someone who hadn't spoken a word to me during my exit. She wrote, "We'd love to explore a collaboration opportunity. We believe your firm's expertise aligns well with our future goals." I read it twice, then closed the tab. I didn't need to respond. But not all of this was about me. One of the most surprising outcomes of this transition was how it affected my family. During my corporate years, I had been guilty of missing dinners, skipping vacations, and working through weekends. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was just that the company always seemed to need me more. But now, everything was different. I worked from home more often. I picked up my kids from school. My partner and I had lunch together at actual tables, not in rushed texts or evening complaints. One night, while tucking my daughter into bed, she whispered, "You smile more now." And I realized she was right. I wasn't chasing stability anymore. I had found it, on my own terms. Still, I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when doubt crept back in. A few months into the new venture, a larger competitor approached me with an acquisition offer. The number they quoted was tempting. It was the kind of deal that could allow me to retire comfortably or at least slow down significantly. But something inside me hesitated. I sat with the offer for a weekend. Thought about it. Talked it over with my team, my family, and finally, I called Gerald. "Take the money if you're tired," he said bluntly. "But if you still have fire in your gut, keep building. People like you, people who earn trust, not just business, they don't come around often. You walk away now, and it's not just your story you're ending. It's a story others are watching to find courage." That hit me hard. Because he was right. I wasn't just building a company anymore. I was building proof that you can start over, that relationships outlive job titles, and that being discarded doesn't mean you're done. So I turned down the offer. Instead, I doubled down. We launched a mentorship program for professionals over 40 who had been laid off and didn't know where to turn. The applications flooded in. We couldn't take everyone, but we tried. Some of them just needed to hear they weren't crazy. That their experience was still valuable. That they weren't too late to matter. The stories they shared were heartbreaking and familiar, people who had given decades to their companies only to be replaced by someone younger, cheaper, flashier. People who were asked to train their own successors before being let go. People who were told it's just business, as if that made it hurt less. And yet, in helping them, I found a new layer of healing within myself. Then, one morning, I received an invitation to speak at an industry conference in New York. The keynote spot. Thousands of attendees. The topic? Resilience in the Age of Restructuring. I laughed when I read the title. A year ago, I had been another name in a downsizing email. Now, they wanted me to speak about surviving it. I accepted. Standing backstage before the keynote, I took a moment to breathe. I thought about the office I used to walk into every day. The desk I had cleared out without fanfare. The hallway I had walked down for the last time with no one bothering to say goodbye. Then I stepped onto the stage, to applause that filled the room. And I realized I had never really lost anything. I had simply made space for something new. As I stood at the podium under the warm lights of the conference stage, I looked out into a sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, but many just searching for something to believe in. I thought about the version of me who had once been escorted out of an office like a stranger in a place I helped build. I thought about the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just lost everything I had worked my entire adult life for. But most of all, I thought about the people who still believed that losing a job meant losing your identity. So I spoke, not with bitterness, but with truth. I told them what no corporate handbook will, that loyalty can be beautiful, but it can also blind you. That being good at your job doesn't always protect you. That sometimes, the only way to discover your worth is to have it questioned. And as I finished my talk, I saw something remarkable. People were standing, applauding. Not because I had said something extraordinary, but because they saw themselves in my story. They, too, had been overlooked, underestimated, and cast aside. And now they knew they weren't alone. Back at home, life moved at a different rhythm. My days were filled with purpose, not pressure. I had time to walk the dog, laugh with my kids, and even teach a class on leadership at the local college. Ironically, I had become more of a leader outside the system that once defined me. Looking back, getting terminated was the push I didn't know I needed. I didn't just rebuild, I redefined. And in doing so, I became someone I never would have met if I had stayed in that office, behind that title, under someone else's vision. Sometimes, the worst endings carry the seeds of your best beginnings. You just have to be willing to grow through the silence.